Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Astro-Tarot Deep Dive. I am here with Susheela Kundargi, and we're here to talk about June 2023. We were just chatting a little bit before we started recording about how does the month feel to you? I can't really land on it. And so obviously we'll talk about it as we move forward with the episode, but it's an interesting month, and I think that it's important to pay attention to how we're coming out of eclipse season, how we're leaving May. For a lot of people, this is a big time of transition in some way. Something big is coming to fruition, or people are moving. You're reconsidering what you want to take with you into the future. So June feels like a month of getting all of those little pieces together. It feels like we're throwing out stuff, making room to bring new stuff in, but it's somewhat of a prolonged process.
Yeah, I was comparing it to sort of like floating down a river, and stuff is flying by. Out of 21 cards here, only 5 of them are major arcana. So it's all these minor energies coming through. And it may just feel like that. Like there's a piece of information, I got it, I'll throw it away. I got that. Oh, I need that. It's just like lightning speed, which is Gemini really, but there's all these other things that we'll get into. But, I pulled 2 cards for the whole month, and I was actually just pulling out 1 card. And as I was explaining to you off air, it was this she-wolf card that came out, and it was the unleashing component, but behind it was another card, which was the harnessing. And so the harnessing of this is the high priestess. This is the intuition and unleashing the wild within. It's the harnessing and the unleashing, the harnessing and the unleashing. It's not harnessing. This is a part of me forever, and this is not unleashing. We did all that purging before. This is stuff comes in, it goes out, it comes in, it goes out, it comes in, it goes out. I'm going, I'm doing, I'm talking, I'm here, I'm there. And it's a big month because there's a lot of that, but they're not major influences, they're transient influences.
Yeah, as you're speaking, it's reminding me of, it's important to remember that whenever we're about to reach the peak of a particular energy, there's always a buildup. It's never just from one day to the next, oh, this thing is happening. There's always a buildup. And as you pointed out those 2 cards right now, so many of the conversations that I've been having recently are mostly with women, and it has been about tapping into their intuition. It's really interesting how we go through cycles. And right now I'm in the cycle of speaking to women who are specifically coming to me saying, I want to get to know my intuition. I want to know how to differentiate. And so it's interesting as you bring up those 2 cards, because we have the element of the high priestess, which is so much of getting in touch with that very psychic, intuitive part of oneself. But that unleashing, there has to be a willingness to unleash a part of us. There has to be a willingness to also let go of a part of us in order to really honor that very intuitive psychic part, I think.
Yeah, and it's in this case too, it's not even the when we that she-wolf card, it's like to let out a part, not even to like release it and release it into the wild and
right.
have it be a part of us. It's like to let it out and show, use that wild side, or that the part that was suppressed or whatever. And as we look at all the elements that are showing up this month, there will be a lot of things that might be a little less tangible than we would like.
Really, really good point. Absolutely. So, okay, we begin with June 2nd. We begin with June 2nd, and that is Venus and Cancer trine Neptune and Pisces. So immediately we begin with very almost ethereal like energy, like flowing and very receptive, very soft, on a very basic interpretation. Venus and Cancer trine Neptune and Pisces. What do you need to feel nurtured? What do you need Venus to feel nurtured? Cancer trine Neptune and Pisces. This is very much like yoga, meditation, being around water with this energy. So beautiful, so healing. Mind you, this is a day before a full moon, which we'll get to in a second. So a day before a full moon with this much water energy, we might be feeling very emotional. Venus in Cancer is our relationship to how we allow ourselves to be nurtured and taken care of. And perhaps this realization of, do I allow that as much as I think? And if I don't, why not? And the Neptune and Pisces, it's interesting. Neptune and Pisces, I always have a difficult time putting words to it, but it's, to me, it feels always like a connection to a higher self, a connection to a divine guidance. And it feels like a really beautiful day to go within. If you're a creative, to lean into your creativity, see what comes up, look for a circle or a friend, community to really lean into. There's a sense of needing safety, especially emotional safety. And again, we're leaving May, which was so heavy with eclipse energy, especially the second half. What is it that you understand there is a releasing of, and where does that leave you?
Well, I'm using the Muse deck by Chris Ann, and they use materials for pentacles. And this is the Knight of Pentacles. And this is the only deck that I can think of that actually has a horse in motion to this degree. Usually the horse is walking or standing still or being led by a person. It's a very slow moving, earthy, grounded kind of knight. It's interesting in this deck, and I mean, you know, I picked these things just like based on feel.
Yeah.
Well, this knight is galloping. So knights are all champions of something. They're very pro whatever the element is. They're depicted in this deck by roses, but bigger than the rose is this giant succulent there in the background. And it's green, which is heart chakra, against a red background, which is the life force. So it's like moving towards grounded energy. It's probably quicker than in any other deck, which is funny. So it's, you know, loyalty, trustworthiness, integrity, patience, stamina, longevity, all of that stuff. And it's interesting that we start the month like this, because it's like you're running a marathon here, not a sprint. So you're gonna set the tone and set the pace, and you've got this beautiful thing blossoming, kind of like at the end of it, like this foreshadowing of, keep this in mind, it's gonna get weird. I'm your, you know, your steadfast companion here. Like this is it's almost like a message from the universe.
I really appreciate that card, because this much water energy, Venus in Cancer, trine Neptune and Pisces, can just feel again that you can just get lost in so much. And that card is okay, you can give yourself again what you need, especially if it's an emotional release, but keep in mind that you're still moving forward. There's to what you mentioned earlier, there's a championing of continuing to move forward. Yeah. So on June 3rd, we have the full moon in Sagittarius. So by, I don't know, tradition, if you will, the full moon in Sagittarius is known as the full moon of truth. Sagittarius is known as the sign of truth. That sign, if you know any Sagittariuses, they tend not to have any filter when they speak. They speak their truth, and I think that that's important to understand that. I think the truth, our truths are subjective, right? To each person has their own truth, and this full moon, I think, is just going to allow and highlight for people to be much more expressive about what they may be experiencing and going through at the time. Again, that aspect from the previous day with all of that water energy and then this full moon of truth can feel like a very emotional event, but it's still a full moon in Sagittarius. What's coming up is the truth will set you free. I think there is this calling to just say the thing, what's on your mind, whether it is that you need to say it to someone else or a truth that needs to be accepted within you, that on the other side of that truth that is of acceptance, of self-acceptance in some way, as soon as you accept that, on the other side of that, you may not have a clear path, but at the very least, you've crossed that threshold of something that you may have been in denial of. And it again, which is still lingering that energy from eclipses. And just because eclipses hit us with the truth doesn't mean that we always accept that.
Yeah, and it's really funny that we get this again so quickly. This is the second card only, and it's the High Priestess again. And so it is a card connected to the moon. It's a card connected to your intuition, again, about revealing truths, but also knowing you're not going to know everything. And also people don't need to know everything,
right?
They also don't need to know all of your truth. You know, there's that need to explain. So when we go back to, like, you know, when I think about the month being like harnessing and releasing, or harnessing and unleashing, kind of back and forth, it's a little bit of that, of the maybe some things are a little TMI, you know, for people, and it doesn't have to be in, you know, in that way. It can be like, you don't want to have to be going back and retracing your steps after making yourself overly vulnerable. You know, there's opening up, and then there's the oversharing component. And there's also the desire to know more, and like, I'm developing my intuition, so I want to know everything. It's like, that will be extremely frustrating, because you will not know everything. That is not the point.
Right.
And so the other interesting thing is, with these two cards in this one, so her eye is covered and her hand is up, and there's like a sensing, and it, you know, it can also be a stopping or a waiting, or sensing with other faculties. And in this one, it's the side view, so we still only see one eye, and the hand is outstretched again, like a barrier or a boundary, or trying to, you know, glean the information as it's coming through, with the cat there, which is again like an elemental component, you know, a spiritual elemental helper, spirit helper. So it can be frustrating, or it can be enlightening. And I think that the critical factor in determining which one that is your expectations. Like, release, if you want to unleash something, release your expectations while delving into that intuitive place.
Yeah, so well put. Because that hand out is just, let's just wait a second. Let's see what unfolds. And this is great, because on June 4th, we have a Mercury-Uranus conjunction in the sign of Taurus. So we have to remember that we had a Mercury retrograde in Taurus in May. It was part, again, of eclipses. I personally loved that Mercury retrograde in Taurus. Prior to that, it felt like things were moving too quickly for me. I needed that little bit of a reset. And so Mercury retrogrades are really great to go back to certain routines or certain things that you had forgotten about. And so this Mercury now direct conjunct Uranus, it's a few things. One, like a spark of genius, right? Uranus is that genius factor in the zodiac. Mercury is cognitive thought, how we view the world. In Taurus, this is something that comes out of nowhere that can shift your perception. It shifts the way that you think. And this is especially true because Mercury is now direct. Uranus is the planet of the unexpected. Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So Mercury is kind of like the mentee of Uranus. Uranus always has something to teach Mercury. And there has to be an openness. There has to be a willingness to not be stuck, Taurus, in a truth that perhaps no longer fits. And so as we're reviewing the cards that have just come up, there's something that needs to be revealed. And I don't think it will take too long. I think it's actually pretty fast moving. But I think the rest of the month will tell whether we can accept that or not. So it's really interesting the first couple of days.
Oh yeah. And I have it's the Queen of Emotions here, which is the Queen of Cups. And again, it's really interesting how this like ocean, the fish and everything is like above her head, like emotions in our mind versus in our heart. This is the nurturing queen. It's the most intuitive, most nurturing, most like the Empress in the minors. And when you get into that weird place of, you know, frustration and this isn't happening the way I thought it was going to happen, and just go back to that nurturing place and remember that everything is actually, if you just let go and stop trying to dictate how things should happen, which we have a hard time doing because we like to be in control of everything. Remember that the universe is way more nurturing, way more supportive, way more loving and kinder and softer and gentle when you allow it.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful energy. It's like, just, you know, the expression on her face is just kind of like, just stop and calm down.
Right. And I think that's so important to remember on a week that can be rather emotional. Mercury Uranus conjunction, just to also give a little bit more of mundane interpretations, that can manifest in expecting the unexpected. So expecting a pleasant invitation somewhere, expecting a change in plans. Oh, we had this whole thing planned and now we have to kind of rearrange. Remain flexible. Things happen, right? So to your point, we like to be in control. There's so much about this energy, especially the first couple of days, that is so much around not controlling and allowing for you to be guided by this. Mercury Uranus conjunction, for anyone who wants to present something, launch something, brainstorm with others. This is really great energy for that, because Uranus allows, again, that genius, multiple geniuses in one room. But in Taurus, it's how do we actually make this genius or connect all of our genius ideas and actually create a plan over time. So I wanted to name that because I think that that's really important too, especially because June 4th is a Sunday. So that prepares you into the following week. Okay, June 5th, Venus leaves the sign of Cancer, enters the sign of Leo. This is important. This year, we're going to have a Venus retrograde in Leo. This isn't going to happen till July, so we'll talk about it in next month's forecast. But just to give you some reference, Venus spends 3-4 weeks usually in a sign and then moves on to the next one. Venus enters Leo on June 5th and doesn't leave till October 8th. Okay. It's a long time. This Venus retrograde is going to be from July 22nd to September 3rd. The first thing that Venus is going to do as it enters Leo is that it's going to oppose Pluto in Aquarius. Venus retrograde tends to be reconsideration in relationships, reconsideration of our style, reconsideration of creativity, of what we love, of who we love, of how we love ourselves. In Leo, this is the relationship to our identity, because Leo is the sign that is ruled by the sun, and the sun represents all of our sun signs. I am a Capricorn, I am a Pisces, I am a Taurus. Venus retrograding in July we're going to reconsider a lot about how we show up in the world. Why does this matter now? Because we need to begin to pay attention to the things that we no longer relate to in the same way. I don't really like that anymore. I don't know. And the opposition to Pluto in Aquarius, it's will showing up differently than people are used to seeing me, empower me or disempower me. So it's important to begin tracking. This is where you want to start journaling a little bit. I think it'll help to come back.
So the two, for the two elements, the two aspects happening on that day, I have bizarre cards to be placed together. The Eight of Voices, which is the Eight of Swords. And in this deck, she's blindfolded. And it's interesting too, because the swords are their intellect and communication, and they're associated with air, but they're specifically voices in this. And the Eight of Swords is really about, and it's all internal. It's not in reality. It's an inability to see the way out of something. Juxtaposed, we have the Wheel of Fortune, which is a number 10, which is like the completion number. And in this deck, it's very interesting too, because we always think of the Wheel of Fortune as being fortunate. We're back on top again. Everything's a cycle. Sometimes if we were down, now we're up. That's when the Wheel of Fortune shows up. But in this deck, it's showing the phases of the moon, and it's just a different phase. It doesn't feel up or down. And so when you have these two together on that day, it's like, you don't need to know how to get out of it. You just have to move through it. Is really what it is. And stop trying to find the solution, like the big answer to the question, like, I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. And it's kind of like, you don't need to figure it out. You just have to experience it. Go for a walk, do something. It doesn't need to be all, you don't need to have closure, or you don't need to have like a final resolution, or you don't need, it's not that. It's fortunate circumstances if you go through the cycles, like if you go through the motions, if you go through the phases, if you go for a walk, if you change your environment, if you whatever, just keep moving through it. And then this is not going to feel so limiting. And this is all self-imposed anyway. It's not that you can't do something, or you can't find the answer, or they're not giving you resolution, or all those things that we tell ourselves. It's in here. And again, it's still holding on to that high priestess energy of like wanting to know everything. Like that's one of the big things that I think we have to let go of this month, is like the need to know everything and the need to explain everything.
This, as you're speaking, this Venus and Leo, I think, is the relationship to our ego, the relationship Venus to our ego, Leo. And this isn't about, demonizing the ego. It's not about that. It's about the reconsideration of how much weight do we put on needing to know before we can actually just trust ourselves,
Mhm.
when essentially the trusting of the self comes because you don't know. And I
Yeah.
think that so much of that component of us is going to be what is at work over the next couple of months. So I think that even though those two cards together are a little off,
Yeah.
I think they're very appropriate.
Yeah.
I think they're very appropriate. So on June 9th, we have Mercury in Taurus sextile Neptune in Pisces. I think that this adds a little bit of a calming element. Mercury in Taurus, it's okay. If I focus on the practical things, if I focus on putting one foot in front of the other, one step at a time, one day at a time, consistency, commitment, just showing up for the things I know. The sextile to Neptune and Pisces always representing, again, that connection to spirit, that guiding light. Um, if I lean into that, because a sextile is an invitation, a
Mhm.
sextile, it's like, this is also available. You can also think of things in this way if you choose. It really invites us to use our free will. Sextiles are not energies like squares or oppositions that really put things in your face. If we choose to take on this path of, I can only control what I can control, I know that I am on the right path. And there is something about that that drives some people crazy. Well, what does that mean? It's like, well, the point is for you to not be so concerned with what that means and understand that when you show up, when you
Mhm.
commit, where you don't hide, where you don't dissociate, where you don't pretend that what's happening is not happening, which can also be Neptune and Pisces, you have to believe that that's enough. And eventually it will be.
Mhm. So there's a perfect card. It's like you almost described exactly what this card means. But, part of that energy too is in that space of trying to control everything or over plan everything, and this is how everything's going to go. Not only does it not allow for the universe to give us something way more spectacular, it creates a lot of disappointment all the way through.
Yeah.
And so if you remember that the stuff that comes to you, the stuff that shows up is a vibrational match to the stuff, to the energy that you're putting out there. If you're in that space of trying to control everything, what is that message? So what gets reflected back at you?
Mhm,
It's not going to be good.
mhm.
Controlling energy is not the energy of abundance. It's not the
Right.
energy of the big love. It's not the energy of happiness and joy in any shape or form. So that letting go of all of that gives you the freedom to, or gives the universe the freedom, and it frees you of holding on to a whole lot of negativity. So virtually, and I know all the Virgos kind of get really nervous when I say this, but virtually nothing goes according to plan.
Such a good point.
So
Yeah.
just forget about it. And we've got the Seven of Pentacles,
Mhm.
which is progress. It's looking at all of these roses that are growing, and not the fact that, I don't know what, something didn't grow in the corner, but
Right.
everything else is flourishing and it's getting better. You're way past the halfway point. Like
Mhm.
this is real progress
Mhm.
showing up for you if you just allow it to do what it does best. It's like, stop micromanaging, and that can be like very literal or figurative.
Mhm.
Stop worrying about, well, this doesn't go there, or they said this to me, or I'm not allowed to do that, or
Mhm.
none of that stuff is conducive to what you want to create.
Mhm.
It is really like hard for some people because the more they want something, the more they're going to try and control it.
Yeah. Yeah. You really blew my mind right now a little bit. how nothing ever really goes according to plan.
Yeah.
And that's so simple and it's so true because even the things that, even when we do meet the manifestation of some of our dreams or and our desires, we have to remember that the road we thought we were going to take to get there wasn't that.
No.
It wasn't that. It reminds me of a conversation I had a few days ago with my brother, and he was talking about the job that he has. He's like, I just kind of ended up here. And I was like, yeah, you did. And he has an amazing job where he gets to travel the world. He really loves it. So I'm bringing that example in because I think that, and he is someone who is very disciplined. He shows up day to day to his own commitments that he's made to himself. So I think this serves as an example of when I know the things that I love, the things that matter to me, and I show up for those things, and I really am intentional with what I have in my life, who's in my life. We can't underestimate the magnetism that that type of energy creates beyond what our cognitive mind can really even think about. And so it's a really it's a really good point.
Well, I think too, when people are trying to control everything is because they are so focused on a very specific outcome. And
Mhm.
so if you're doing something logistically, you're going to want to plan and coordinate and do all these things so that you can avoid pitfalls and that you can, and that's great, but it doesn't apply to every aspect of your life. You have to allow for the whatever to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I this feels like there's some intangibility, but this takes us into June 11th, where Pluto retrograde re-enters Capricorn. On that same day, we have Mercury in Taurus trine Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. Mercury enters Gemini, Venus in Leo square Jupiter in Taurus. So there's a lot that happens on that June 11th. But this Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, we got a taste of Pluto in Aquarius between March and June 10th. That was a taste. Think about how things change for you, how there was a different feel, how you have different aspirations. Maybe you don't know what those aspirations are anymore. The things that you used to want to do really badly, maybe now you don't. Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn is saying there are things we have to review before we can really move forward. So Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn, and it will remain there till January 22nd, 2024. Not retrograde till then, but in Capricorn till then.
Yeah.
So over the next 6 to 7 months, there is a redo. There is, oh, you want to go there, but you're still holding on to this. You want to go there, but there is still the sense of safety, Capricorn, that you feel you have to cling on to for dear life. Pluto. Pluto retrograde is going to retrograde 29, 28, back to 27 degrees of Capricorn. So that's going to take us back to things we were thinking about reconsidering November, December 2022, January, February 2023. Okay. Do you want to pull the cards for that, or do you want me to go through? Yeah.
Well, I'll talk about the first two. I've got 4 cards there because we've
Okay.
got 4 things happening that day, but I'll talk
Yeah.
about the first 2. So the other interesting thing is, I always like to draw your attention to the numbers when they show up,
Mm-hmm.
and those are significant as well. So we just had a 7 of Pentacles, or 7 of materials in this case. So 7 of Pentacles, and now we have the 7 of Cups together. So 7 and 7. And later on, you'll see a 3 and a 3 together, and then a 4 and a 4 together, which again, it's like 7, 7, 7, 7's happening.
Yeah.
Those are very magical numbers out there. They're the numbers that make things happen. They're this, it's spontaneity, it's teamwork, it's stability, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, when you mentioned your brother, like I just ended up here. Most people are not working in the field that they studied, like unless you're like a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer. It's like a very specific thing that's typically not something you go into nursing and then become a gardener after graduation. But there's a lot of things that we study and we end up in something else. In this month, with this trying to not over focus and control stuff, we end up with this 7 of Cups energy here, which is, it can be confusion, it can be daydreaming of like, well, what did I want to do once upon a time? Like, you know, when I was 7 years old, I imagined I was going to be a ballerina, you know, or whatever kind of stuff. And we tend to keep thinking in these very overly structured paradigms of like, well, I can't do this because this is this much, or I can't now go and do this because I've invested. It's telling us that we still have so many options, and we can do stuff, and we can change things, and we can just say, you know, this would make me feel really happy. I don't even know if it exists. Let the universe bring it to you. And it's also, well, in terms of love, the 7 of Cups, and this is like a meaning that we're often focused on the options and the opportunities. But the 7 of Cups in a love relationship is really about lust. It's a lusty energy. So it's kind of like forgetting about the fact that, you know, Tuesday's our date night and you know, it's kind of like, whew, you know, caution to the wind kind of thing, stirring up those feelings. Simultaneously, we have the Ace of Swords, or the Ace of Voices in this one. And this is, it's not about inspiration, like in the creative sense. This is about intellect. This is like the fine tuning, coming up with something new, or something got thrown at you. You know, you're walking down the street, you bump into somebody you haven't seen in a long time, and they're like, so what are you doing these days? And you tell them, I'm doing this same old boring thing, but I'd really like to be doing that. And then they say, well, oh my gosh, I live right next door to the guy who owns the something. And you're like, oh my God. And then you end up there. It's that light bulb. It's like that light bulb moment, or light bulb situation, or you'll never guess who I bumped into, you never guess what I found, or I thought I lost this thing and I found it in the drawer when I was purging, you know, whatever. These are options and opportunities. Again, still riding off of that Wheel of Fortune energy and the 7 of, you know, things are happening. And we did warn everybody several months ago about the Pluto in Aquarius thing. It's gonna make you feel like, oh my gosh, here we are, we're in this age of Aquarius. And then it just gives you a taste. It gives you that little sampler of this, this, and this, and this. And we're going into Capricorn again, and we get to say, okay, yeah, this is familiar. Where the hell did all that empathy go now? Okay. I'll go deal with all the logistical stuff. And then in January, we get back to that empathy thing and all the other less concrete things, and that's going to last us for like a heck of a long time.
That Pluto retrograde in Capricorn is really going to, I think, present us with parts of us that we thought we had, you know, healed or overcome or transcended. I think it's going to and I think that it's going to present those parts of us to us through experiences with others, through kind of throwing like a little wrench in something and being like, what the? And I think that what's going to matter is how we show up to it. Can we kind of just laugh at it and be like, all right, okay, I guess I have to deal with this? Or are we going to be absolutely consumed by it? God, get that, right? There's something so powerful about Pluto. We have no control. To me, Pluto feels like life being life on life's terms. We are this big in comparison to life being life on life's terms.
Yeah.
There's something very empowering about being humbled in that way. And I don't think it's something that we come to understand immediately, but over time we realize, oh, because I chose to look at that situation from that perspective, I was able to come out of it differently.
Yeah, there's a level of maturity
Right.
that's required there of
Yeah.
accepting, like, I'm really in charge of bleep all, and I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna show up every day, and I'm gonna enjoy whatever life presents.
That's such a great point. It does take a certain level of maturity. That Mercury and Taurus trine Pluto retrograde in Aquarius is all that earth energy does require a certain level of maturity. I love that because I think that a lot of times when it's talked about just acceptance and go with the flow and all of that, I think there's a bit of this idea that it's you just not doing anything when essentially it actually takes a certain level of maturity and groundedness to say, okay, something is happening. That's such a good point. Yeah. This takes us into Mercury entering Gemini. Mercury enters Gemini. Mercury is ruled by Gemini. This is what Susheela talked about in the beginning. Just things really just in and out really quickly. It's like the river with a lot of things. Mercury in Gemini is great when it comes to being open-minded, being curious, researching, talking to different people. Although this energy specifically isn't about trying new things, I think that Mercury in Gemini invites us to be curious to new things, because that opens up your mind in different ways. You create new neurological pathways. Yeah, I like that, Mercury in Gemini.
Mhm. Do you want to do the next one?
Okay, sure. So then on that same day, we're still on June 11th, we have Venus and Leo squaring Jupiter and Taurus. So a few things with this. Venus and Leo, the planet of love and relationships in the sign of the heart. A square creating a 90-degree angle to Jupiter and Taurus. Jupiter and Taurus to me right now feels like growing pains. Like Jupiter wants to grow and expand, and Taurus is like, but this is what I like. When we have this combo of Mercury and Gemini, Mercury enter Gemini, that's an invitation. Can you look at this a different way? Can you be open to a different perspective? Can you be flexible in the approach? And that square, that can be, no, this is what I want. I want it in this way. This is how this relationship needs to go. There's no changing it. This is how it's always been. If that's what we lean into, it's going to be very overwhelming energy. If we answer the invitation for growth and expansion to a different perspective, I think Venus and Leo is going to thrive. I think it's going to be a lot of loving energy. On a more mundane interpretation of this, be mindful of spending lots of money. Venus and Leo, look at the really luscious, beautiful house, couch. Jupiter and Taurus, more. Mercury and Gemini, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it. So be mindful of how you're spending that money a few days before and a few days after that date.
Yeah, so we've got two very compatible cards, I guess, for those last two aspects, all on the same day as the other two. It's a biggie. So I guess I'm guessing that we're just out of the Mercury retrograde shadow at this point.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So the pages, so these are both pentacles, it's materials in this deck, roses all over the place, everything's blooming and going and growing, and it's just amazing. Pages are all messengers, so they're always about communication in some form, whether it's spiritual, written, vocal, intuitive, whatever. This is a practical kind of communication. This is about paperwork and getting your passport updated, and don't forget to do all of your emails and your spreadsheets and your, I don't know, whatever, all that very practical type of communication. It's also about receiving communication from other people about practical things. It's not about like, suddenly people calling you on that day and getting stuff off their chest. It's just kind of like, oh, hey, did I lend you my, whatever, my hedge trimmers? Could I get those back? Like that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, it's not that it's boring communication, but it's you may hear from people you haven't heard from in a while, but it's also, because we don't have that Mercury shadow anymore, now is a good time to sign documents or things without being so worried that you're signing away something, some hidden clause in there. We've got this beautiful Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Materials here. So she is that abundant, lush, prosperous, grounded, motherly earth goddess kind of energy. It's receptive, but it's also procreative.
Mm.
It's not like she's, so when you talk about spending, like just she is giving, but more than the giving, she's receptive. So it's like making financial decisions or turning things, making wise choices. So we're still in that I want to control everything mindset. Channel that into, well, how could I take that obsessive energy and do something that's actually maybe for the greater good, or for, this is very frustrating. If this didn't happen, I would be devastated. Well, how can you reframe that in a way that's like, okay, if that didn't happen, what would be even better than that?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know, but the energy of the Queen of Materials is inviting you to sort of allow for that again. And the two of them together having that communication and this prosperity is like, you get frustrated, you think things aren't going, go for a walk and talk to some people.
Mm-hmm.
Hop on a mastermind Zoom call, something different to shake it up, where there's
Mm-hmm.
people who are inspiring, or they're doing what you want to do. Like there's a practical aspect to this to get you out of that, you're a big bumbling vortex of swear words.
I really love that Queen of Pentacles. I think
Yeah.
it's so beautiful for that Venus and Leo that gives you
Yes.
this she's so regal in that,
Yeah.
And the Jupiter in Taurus, Venus in Leo and its highest expression is regal because there is a knowing of who we are. It's just an innate sense of trust within the self. And the Jupiter in Taurus, again, in its highest expression, is the trust and belief in the abundance that is always there for us.
Mhm.
What a beautiful card. So that takes us to June 15th. A few days later, we have Mercury and Gemini square Saturn in Pisces. If there is a continued desire to control, this is going to feel so overwhelming. Mercury, the planet of cognitive thought in Gemini, is, 100,000 thoughts speeding. And the square to Saturn in Pisces is saying, well, I don't know what to do. Gemini is beautiful in that it reminds us that we have options.
Mhm.
But when we don't choose something, we're just lost. And that Saturn in Pisces can have a little bit of energy of depression, a little bit sadness. And so that Mercury and Gemini square Saturn and Pisces, I think on the one hand is great to say, okay, this is what I'm working on right now, or this is what I want to focus on right now, and creating some structure around that, because both Gemini and Pisces energy can be even though one is air and one is water, both of those elements are so
Intangible, really.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that the intangibility of that energy can just have us feeling lost. There is a call to a little bit of structure to again to show up for the things that you can show up for. And but at the same time, the flexibility of knowing that you can't have it all figured out right now.
Yeah.
Really interesting energy.
Yeah. So we have the Five of Cups, and that's typically an energy of feeling left out of
Mm.
something, like a little bit victim-y, a little bit
Mhm, mhm,
why a little bit poor me. Everything's going well for everybody else,
mhm.
but it didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of perspective. And so all the fives are like, they're really transient energies, except for the Hierophant, but all the fives in the lower cards are just about like these little annoyances, and they're so temporary and so fleeting. It's like the next day you're kind of like, what was I thinking? Well, why was I so
Mhm, mhm,
upset? It's almost like sometimes, you've dreamt something, you don't know what you've dreamt, and you wake up sad,
mhm.
or you wake up happy, or you wake up agitated, or you wake up aroused, whatever it is. This day you might just wake up feeling like, huh, everything sucks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. June 17th, Saturn starts its retrograde. Um, I think Saturn is the one that starts per usual, starts that retrograde season for us. Saturn retrogrades in Pisces and is there till November 4th. So Saturn in Pisces is an energy that we haven't experienced in 30 years. The last time I was there, I think it was like 93, 94-ish, somewhere around that time. And so between March and June 16th, we experienced the first, I believe, first 8 or 9 degrees of Saturn in Pisces. Saturn in Pisces is a few things. To me, it has felt like compassionate accountability. I think that so much of what Saturn in Pisces has reminded us of is accountability that is degrading, that is demeaning, that where you're constantly beating yourself up for something. It never really amounts to something, to a changed behavioral pattern over time, which Saturn rules a lot of. Saturn in Pisces is compassionate accountability, but really about coming to an understanding of, God, I really am responsible for this. I'm the only one responsible for changing certain things in my life. And it landing so deeply, that Pisces energy landing so deeply that again, it can go one of two ways. It can go, okay, it lands deeply. I get it. I understand it. I can move slowly towards a different way.
Mm.
Or, oh, woe is me. I can't do it. This is too hard. Just the really whiny part of like the lower expression of Pisces energy with Saturn there, not fun.
Mhm.
So, Saturn in Pisces is also the responsibility that we have, Saturn, of ending something, Pisces, because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac.
So we have, well, in this deck, the kings are on their side, and they're usually mirror images, and they're called the muse of whatever the suit is. And the wands are fire, and so they're called inspiration in this deck. So we have the muse of inspiration, which is like the king of wands energy. And the king of wands is fiery, frequently arrogant, does things the way he wants it, when and how he wants it, without really caring too much about other people. Sort of like, well, they'll just have to live with it kind of thing. Um, that's more in the negative side. In the positive side, it's about transcending that arrogance and having integrity. So you talk about compassionate accountability. It's think about people who screw up in your
Mhm.
life,
Mhm.
and they come to you, and they're not playing the victim. They're not coming up with excuses. They're not saying, oh, well, I couldn't do the thing because the thing happened. And it's like, it's not really my fault. And da, da, da. They'll come forward with, this thing happened. I'm really sorry. I'd like to fix it. Now, the
Mhm.
King of Wands might be like, well, screw you. This was your chance. Too bad. But this is the opportunity to
Mhm.
say, okay, I get it. Let's move forward. Go ahead and do the thing. Thank you for, rewarding the good behavior, having the integrity. If the shoe was on the other foot and you were the person who goofed up, and now you're trying to be accountable and responsible and solution oriented for what's happening, you would want the other person on the other side to say, okay, great, let's move on. What do you need from me in order to help you succeed or to fix the problem? That's sort
Mhm.
of the higher vibration of the King of Wands. It's that, you know getting out of that petty place of like blame and pointing the finger, and you're just stupid anyway, so whatever. it's
Yeah.
it's going like, okay, stuff happens, great, thank you for coming forward, let's do something great.
Mhm.
It's a very beautiful card, again, with like a whole lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah. You know, this is a lot of fixed and mutable energy in the air. So the fixed signs of the zodiac are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. And we have a lot of Taurus, a lot of Leo. And then we have the mutable signs, which are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. And currently there's a big activation of Gemini and Pisces. And there's activation of the other signs in different ways.
Mm.
So when fixed energy is staying the course, really believing in that big picture in the long run, and just there's no need to move quickly when I know what the outcome is going to be. It's a really great energy in that. Mutable energy tells fixed energy, that's great. Keep the eye on the prize, but remain flexible in the approach. Now, those two energies, if we can't kind of bring those two energies together, we can want to be just stuck in our ways, and then all of these other thoughts and possibilities just drive us a little crazy.
Mhm.
And so being mindful that it's about, again, that priestess, right? Let me just observe. Let me just observe before I try to cling on to something, hold on to something. There's so much about this month that is really about a change in how we view things, especially how we do them and how we approach life. So June 17th also brings us the new moon in Gemini. Interesting new moon because Saturn just went retrograde. There's so many squares between Gemini and Pisces energy, which is, this is what I want to do. This is how I've always done it. This is really great. And the square, the 90-degree angle to the Pisces energy is, but it's too much, or too many details, too much information, and feeling like you're getting lost and overwhelmed by it all. It doesn't have to be that way.
Mhm.
It can be a new moon in Gemini. I am open, a new moon, open to a new way of seeing something. And that requires that we take a step back and release a little bit of the way that we have viewed the world all along. Um, it's a good new moon if we're willing to be flexible.
Mhm. So in the tarot, Gemini is usually the Lover's card.
Okay.
It's the twins, it's two people, it's a choice. And we'll basically have the Lover's card of the minor arcana, which is the Two of Cups. And it's friendship. It can be friendship or love or partnership, but there's reciprocity there between two forces. So it's also very Pisces energy, which is funny. It's like the two fish swimming in opposite directions. And then we have these two, we have two fish and we have two people swimming around in the water. And it's that it's a very fluid, accepting, giving and taking, giving and taking, giving and taking. If I give a little, I get a little. If I give a little, I get a little. Not this like, I am going to give whatever, 9 love coins and I expect 9 love tokens back.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's like understanding, not not love bombing or not over giving, not people pleasing. It's like, I do this because I like it. There's some for you, there's some for you, there's some for you. And then that partnership of reciprocity kind of comes back. It's like just enough, it's not too much, nice flow. So it can be friendship, it can be business, it can be so many different things. It can even be your energies within you of balancing work and play and this and that. But it's just, it's a nice flow. And it's to remember that in order to bring something into your life, you need to make room for it. You have to give away something. You have to create a void. You don't have to be, you don't want to create barrenness across the board. You have to create a little room to receive the thing that you're looking for.
It's interesting that the Lovers card would come up, because I think that the one of the biggest shifts in how we approach something is going to be how we approach relationships. Because as that Venus continues to transit Leo, and as we get closer to the end of June and into July, so much is going to be reconsideration of relationships or how we show up in relationships. And I think that all of this flexibility that all of this Gemini and Pisces energy is asking us to have is to make room for a new way of relating. So, and it is going to be different. Venus retrogrades are powerful. So, yeah. On June 18th, we have the Sun in Gemini square Neptune in Pisces. The Sun in Gemini, the Sun represents our identity, our ego, our vitality, how we show up. This is who I am, right? And in Gemini is, I am Millie. I am an astrologer. I am a partner. I am a sister. I have a dog. Gemini is all of like the info on us. It's like our profile, right? The square to Neptune in Pisces, I think, is the beginning of, I am all of those things, but I don't know if I want to really continue being all of those things. I am all of those things, but there is so much more to me, Neptune and Pisces. I am all of those things in Neptune and Pisces, but I don't want to be boxed into those things. How can that not shift the dynamic in relationships, which is something that we're headed towards? Keep that in mind this month, that as you are changing, so are others. And there's a purpose to that that we cannot see, and that we probably won't be clear till October, the end of the year.
Yeah, and so we have the 4 of cups and the 4 of emotions here. And what's really nice about this card is that the 4th cup is actually the space between the 2 faces in this one. So it's typically about not seeing the 4th cup. You're so fixated on the same old 3 cups. So all those things, I am this, I am that, I am another thing. They're things that we do, or they're things that we have, but they're not who we are. And the ability to see that 4th thing, that 4th option, it's typically the thing from the universe, that gift from the universe, that we have a hard time seeing. And that's, again, it's like that zooming out far enough to see it. And there's all those shifts. This whole month is about shifts. As I'm going through these cards, I'm realizing it's like, oh, I'm so close to the thing. This is what it always looked like. But when you zoom out, it's something different. It's like the lines in Peru. When you're on the ground, you don't see them at all. And when you get to a certain elevation, they look like certain things. When you get to a different elevation, they look like something else entirely. Certain things fade away. It's kind of like that with our lives, right now.
I think the supporting aspect to this is going to be on June 19th, when we have Jupiter and Taurus sextile Saturn and Pisces. Jupiter and Taurus is the desire for growth and expansion in material goods, you know, in abundance, in money. Sextile to Saturn in Pisces, this is about, I want to grow in this way. I want to see these things manifest in my life. And the sextile to Saturn in Pisces, Saturn always calls for commitment, for discipline, for consistency. And in Pisces, I think this is a big call to, why do you want the things that you want? Because if the day before the sun in Gemini square Neptune in Pisces is, I am all of these things, but I'm not sure that I want to be that. And Jupiter in Taurus is about, but I want to grow in this way and I want to see these things manifest in my life. Which space from within you are you going to come to build those things? Right? Are you going to create more of the same, or are you going to create something differently? And if you are, you have to tap into a different part of you. There has to be much more intention. And Jupiter and Taurus, Jupiter, while it's expansive and Taurus can tend to hoard, I think that in its highest expression, this is about less is more. But less can only be more if we are much more in tune with what we actually need, what we desire, and most importantly, why.
Yeah, there's a beautiful card for this. It's the Judgment card. And in this deck, it's Awakening. So it's a number, it's 20, which is a 10 and a 10. And I like the fact that it's called Awakening in this deck and not Judgment, because it's more to that point of awakening to this whole other thing. When I think about, there was something you said there that just kind of reminded me of when I was clearing money blocks many, many years ago. And I had this weird association that if I had a certain amount of money, then I would have to do all these things that I thought people with that amount of money did. I'd have to live in that neighborhood, in that kind of house, and I'd have to do the whatever, and then I'd have to talk to those neighbors, and then be like, and I was just, it was like this huge thing of shutting off my flow of abundance, because I had this weird, this very narrow viewpoint. Of course, I felt I deserved it and all those other things, but this weird belief that this plus this equaled that, and I didn't like that. So the whole thing was out. And we're shifting that. That's where we're, however that shows up in our lives of, well, I did that, I'm doing this, therefore I have to be whatever. It's like awakening to this, like, what? Where did I get that ridiculous idea? I can be at this plus this square root of, an elephant in the room multiplied by, the diameter of the galaxy, and I can be this.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I like that, because that is an awakening. Yeah. So much, remember, we're going day by day with specific aspects, right? But everything builds on itself. Part of Pluto going back to Capricorn is about reviewing these very ingrained, deeply rooted belief systems that we have about how we think we should be in the world, in order for us to finally break free from that. As the month of June moves forward, there's going to, again, we're going to be presented with experiences, events, conversations that are going to ask, well, why? Why does it have to be that way? Why? Why? And that's what, and if we're very much like, this is just the way that I like things, if we're very much, I hate AI and it should just burn, well, that's where we're going. So the openness, really interesting month. Okay, June 21st is the beginning of Cancer season. It's the solstice. And we have Mercury and Gemini sextile Mars and Leo. So the beginning of Cancer season. This is the beginning of another season. This is the solstice. We have an outlook of the next 3 months or so. I think to me, this feels like, because of everything, of all of the other aspects, is how do I create a new sense of safety and comfort, Cancer, within myself that doesn't include the same components that have always made me feel safe and comfortable. Very interesting Cancer energy, because both Cancer and Taurus energy, which are very active, especially once Cancer season starts, on the one hand, it's a real difficulty moving away from what feels comfortable. I think this is an invitation to really create something new, or really create a new sense of home, whether that's in your work, in your actual home, a new sense of home in your relationships. I think the next 3 months are going to be about redefining that. Mercury and Gemini sextile Mars and Leo. On the one hand, great creative energy, writing, speaking, teaching, learning. Mercury and Gemini, these are all the facts. Mars and Leo, I want to show up in this way. Just, I love this energy. Also, no filter. I speak my mind and this is me. Mars and Leo, inflated ego. Mercury and Gemini, this is what I have to say. So, because it is a month of shift, be mindful of what you say, because you probably will change your mind down the line. And whether or not you can take it back, whether or not someone will accept your apology, totally up to the other person or other people. Use it constructively, for sure.
So we have two really nice cards for this energy. So the solstice, we have the 8 of Pentacles, or the 8 of materials in this case. And it is typically a card of, you know, honing in on your craft, getting a little bit extra certification in something so you can take your skills to the next level. She's also multifaceted here. She's got all these extra arms doing all these extra things. Her hat is a rose, which is also, you know, the material. So she's wearing different hats. It's opening up to that energy of, well, you know, I never really finished that thing. And if I finish that thing, that's really going to help me create this full package when I go and do that project. Or there's a new job I want to apply for, but all the, you know, the job postings are mentioning this software. I don't have that software. I should go to that software. You know, it's an online course, or I can do it remotely, or whatever. It's all these little things that you can add to your toolbox, to your repertoire, to your interest list, to your hobby, whatever, I don't know what, your hobby roster, you know, your extracurricular activities. It's learning, it's remembering that you are a multifaceted person. It's not about wearing yourself out and doing all the things at once, but it's just sort of fine tuning all those little things that will help you get to where you're going. It's not like enrolling in a whole new, you know, bachelor program. It's like saying, hey, you know what, I'm in my 4th year of study. I'm actually going to take these other courses because that will allow me to still complete my degree, but it gives me this little outreach into these certain areas. And then we've also got the 3 of Cups, the 3 of emotions here. It's a very social kind of card. It's going out, it's hanging out with friends, it's laughing and talking and partying. Maybe it can be a special event, it could be like an engagement or graduation or wedding, all those kind of things. summer parties, garden parties, whatever. In those environments, on a negative side, you're talking about saying things that you shouldn't say. It can be somewhat gossipy. It could be showing up with somebody that nobody expected you to show up with.
Yeah.
Many hats, many dates. So look at, she's showing up with him, or with her, like, all of these different things. So it's again, it's small energy still, but it can have, you add up all these little numbers, it can have a far reaching and long lasting impact.
Definitely, definitely, especially with that Leo energy, which
Mhm.
Leo can, and one of its expressions is the exaggeration of things.
Yeah.
So Mercury and Gemini can be, a small exchange of something, but that Leo energy is like, oh, well, they said. So yeah, really interesting. Mercury and Gemini, June 25th, Mercury and Gemini square Neptune in Pisces. Look, we've had so many squares. And by the way, squares, just to remind you all, 90-degree angles, 90-degree angles. They tend to be and described as aspects of tension, aspects that make things difficult, that keep you stuck. I like to think of squares as aspects that catalyze change, because you do come to this feeling of like a fork in the road. And again, choosing, and
Mhm.
it's not even always a choice of what do I do? It's almost a choice of how do I think about this? How do I feel about this? Especially with Mercury and Gemini. Mercury and Gemini square Neptune in Pisces is the inability to see clearly. So if the day before we have a Mercury and Gemini sextile Mars and Leo, I'm going to say all the things, I'm going to express myself, not much thought, and it could be harmless. Mercury and Gemini square Neptune in Pisces is then you coming back and saying, why did I say that? Oh, why did I say that? Um, there is a lack of clarity. It's on purpose. It's for a reason. Mercury and Gemini square Neptune and Pisces, not the best days to sign stuff. And if you do, read it over 10 times, have someone else look at it. It's towards the end of the month, so that can find some people, I don't know, finding a place to live, signing leases, right? For July. So be very mindful of what you're agreeing to, what you're signing, because again, there's just a lack of clarity there.
Mhm. So remember a little while ago, I mentioned we had the two sevens together, and there's two threes and two fours. Well, we
Mhm.
got those two threes together. So remember, we went to the party and we had a lot of fun. And the next day, we're supposed to be collaborating. The best way I can describe this energy is like you go to the party, you're having a lot of fun, you're being introduced to people because it's social. It's not a work thing, it's a social thing. And you say, oh, I hate that company. They are so whatever. They just do this, this, and this, and that. And then on the next day, it's like, yeah, we were going to call you for that interview, but we know that you actually really hate that company. And it's like, no, 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 I didn't say that. Yeah, you were at the party and you had a couple of cocktails and I overheard you saying,
Right.
so I'm not going to introduce you to the person who's going to hire you at such and such. No, 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 no. But so that's the best way I can describe this energy. It's like,
Mhm.
it's really funny because typically this card it shows three people kind of working together. And it's funny because there's a braid here and their heads are all kind of just squished together. It's not like they're kind of stuck together as opposed to choosing to work together.
Oh man. Okay. Hmm.
So it's a bit of a funny energy, and the fact that those two threes are together, it's kind of like, how do I make these odd collection of objects work together?
Right.
It's almost like having, two 1,000 piece puzzles, and they're all in the same box, and
Oh
there's
gosh.
6 pieces missing, and you don't know which set it's you know, which set is missing the pieces.
Yes, that's
Fun
such,
time.
yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I
so,
don't,
so caution is, you know, the word
right,
that we would
right.
use for those, that little stretch of time.
I can't even add any more to that because it is that
Well, and
Mercury
caution
square
is,
Neptune.
you know, when you're on the highway, the caution signs are triangles, they're threes. So
Mhm.
caution. Yeah.
Right, right. This takes us to June 26th, in which we have Mars and Leo square Uranus and Taurus. Okay, Mars and Leo. On the one hand, really proud energy. And in the highest expression is, I am proud of who I am. I am proud of my accomplishments. I feel very motivated by the things that I'm doing. On the other hand, very pricky energy, very just inflated ego, bravado. You're not pleasant to be around. You think all of this about yourself, and everyone around you thinks the absolute opposite. The square to Uranus and Taurus can be, let's say you're operating or someone is operating from the lower expression of Mars and Leo. The square to Uranus and Taurus is someone around you not minding telling you the truth about what they feel about you.
Mm.
And that's a real aspect of tension. So remember, aspects of tension, they either catalyze change. So if you're being a little, arrogant, if you're being arrogant, the square to Uranus and Taurus, someone points it out, you can say, oh, I didn't realize I was coming off like that. Okay. Or that ego just gets bigger and you want to fight back. Mars and Leo, right? On the other hand, this is great energy to become unstuck.
Mm.
And I think this is great energy to become unstuck if we've been in our feels, in our heads a lot. This energy calls for movement, for action, but not, I don't feel towards something specific. This is more like, to your point, let me go for a walk, let me go to the gym, let me go for a hike. And as you get moving, Uranus and Taurus strikes, Uranus strikes. Oh, something dawns on you. Uranus is so much about aha moments. But in this case, if you feel stuck and you use that to just move, there's magic in movement.
Mhm.
On the same day, we have Mercury entering Cancer, leaving the very fast moving energy of, notice how Mercury enters Gemini the same month and leaves Gemini the same month. That is how quickly thoughts and energy are going to be moving. Okay. Mercury entering Cancer is going to be like, okay, I need a little R&R. I need to kind of, go in my shell. Mercury and Taurus, thinking about Mercury, how to take care of the self, Cancer. So not mad at that at all.
We have two very funny cards that it's this little recipe here of, I'm going to show you them together just to get the visual. We have a 3 of Swords for the second aspect, and we have the 10 of Pentacles, or the 10 of materials, for the first one. This is maximum abundance. This is prosperity, wealth, generational wealth. It can be showy. It can be, all the symbolism that goes with it. And so it's like what you're saying, it's that reminder of, you don't need to flaunt it. You have it and it's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And these are these wounds, these old wounds, the sorrow, the guilt, the whatever, and they're mixed up together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, watch out. Just watch out. Just be careful. Yeah.
Yeah.
This can feel, yeah, like it's almost like senseless reopening of a wound. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
actually have to happen,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
I think that card is very much a caution for what Mercury and Cancer can be, because Mercury is again thought, our thoughts, how we perceive the world. And in Cancer,
Mhm.
a different expression of it could be like, oh, woe is me. Look, I love water energy. I love Pisces. I love Cancer. I love Scorpio. But one of the things about that energy is that it can very easily go into self-pity.
Way
Yep,
down. Way down.
way down. And Mercury in Cancer, I think that card serves as a tail, as a cautionary, as a caution.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's our third three. So we had 3, 3, and then we had a
mhm.
10 with a 3
Yeah,
again. So we
yeah.
have those 2 3s and the third 3 with the 10 in the middle, which is like the completion. And the 10 and the 3 together is a 4,
Hmm.
number
Hmm.
4. And so
Hmm.
this whole thing is about 7s and 3s and 4s this whole
Right.
month. So
Yeah.
it's like you can take these things that are not so stable, you can add them to things that are foundational, and then they give you something magical.
Yeah. Then two days after this, on June 28th, we have the Sun in Cancer trine Saturn in Pisces. So any connection between Sun and Saturn is always, how do I commit to myself? Commit Saturn to myself, Sun. Sun in Cancer, um, I am responsible for reparenting myself or parenting myself, taking care of myself. I am responsible for creating an environment within me and around me that supports all that I want to be, because Cancer is that energy of the mother, the parenting. And the Sun there, it brings the responsibility back to us.
Mhm.
Trine Saturn in Pisces is a trine similar to a sextile, is an invitation to saying, can you commit to creating this environment for yourself, whether at work, at home, in relationships? On the one hand, with a lot of compassion, Pisces, and on the other, also remembering and tapping into that innate wisdom that tells us, you know what's what. You know what's what. Again, a lot of water energy, very easily, especially with a trine, to go into judgment of the self, to not do anything, judgment of others, to not have to do anything. Again, oh, woe is me, self-pity. It's so up to us how we hold the energy of at the end of the month.
Mhm. Then we get two major arcanas next to each other. We have this one and then the next aspect. So we have justice here, which is like karma. So it's a neutral influence.
Mm-hmm.
If you are doing something negative, you're behaving badly, you're being judgmental, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you get exactly what happens when you don't do that. You do all the right things, you know, you get justice. So justice is this impartial force at work. You don't want, I mean, sometimes you can do all the right things and people are still angry, but that's fine. At least you know that you did all the right things. It's not so much about, pleasing other people or getting that validation from other people for what you did or didn't do. It's really about you. And so you can even see in the card here, she's like emerging. There's a little bit like that judgment card, that awakening card, but she's
Mm-hmm.
emerging from this of that old self, of being like, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing. I mean, that's what integrity really is. I'm going to do the right thing, even though nobody's watching and nobody else is keeping score. The
Mm-hmm.
universe is, and I am. So I'm going to do the right thing at all
Mm-hmm.
costs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The next day on June 29th, that energy still carries over because Mercury follows the steps of the Sun, which is Mercury in Cancer creating a trine to Saturn in Pisces. So we have to remember that the Sun and Mercury are known as personal planets. And what that is that they are parts of our personality, parts of who we are that we use every single day. The sun represents, again, our identity, how we show up, who we are, right? And Mercury is how we think, how we communicate. Both in Cancer, both together, both creating a trine to Saturn in Pisces. This is so much about focus. The sun, I show up. Mercury, focus. In Cancer, I need to focus on what brings me a sense of safety, home, well-being. The trine to Saturn in Pisces, the connection to Saturn is the commitment to that, the commitment to self, the commitment to, let's say that you're working on, there's a transition of some sort, a transition in you in certain habits, from this habit to another habit, from this relationship to no relationship, or another relationship, or a different part of their relationship, moving homes. There is a focus on, I need to focus on where this transition is taking me right now. Because with that, with this transition at the end of it, there is an ending there. There is something that I'm releasing, Pisces. And if we don't want to feel overwhelmed by all of this water energy, focus is going to help us feel grounded.
Mm. We have a very cool card in this spot. It's the Fool card. And it's often, you know, they say taking a leap of faith or whatever. It's like a reset. And it's very interestingly depicted in this deck, because we've got this desert and she's sort of skipping along, almost like she's defying gravity, like she's on the moon, the way she's bouncing there. And then it's sort of, it's like a plane of existence floating around in space. Well, I don't know if that's like the sun in the distance or just nebula or whatever. And then interestingly, there's this ladder that goes up from space into this plane of existence. And it's about trusting.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like, we don't know, we virtually know nothing about anything at all. So why
Yeah.
are we so, you know, holding on to everything so tightly? This is that time to really take that leap of faith, to say, I am ready for the reset button. I'm just gonna, it's not like throwing caution to the wind and you're gonna be reckless, but it's like letting go of all that stuff that's tethering you to the old self. I'm gonna let it go. I can't control that. That person's driving me crazy. The more I try and do this, I keep running into all of these opposing factors. I don't want to be facing opposing factors. So you have two options. Can you, if you sit there going, I really hate all the opposing factors, all the opposing, that's all I face, it's opposing factors, that's going to give you no pleasure at all. So
Right.
you let it go and you go, okay, I'm just going to focus on this. I'm going to focus on the light and I'm going to just take a leap of faith and I'm going to go there. And
Yeah.
that's where we're at.
Yeah. This takes us to the final aspects of June 30th. Neptune starts retrograding in Pisces on June 30th. And on the same day, we have the Sun Mercury conjunction in Cancer, which is known as a superior conjunction. So Neptune retrograde in Pisces for several months. We don't really feel it. It doesn't really manifest into even something collective. Neptune retrograde in Pisces is what I have noticed and observed. It's the opportunity to connect with, especially in Pisces, a spiritual practice. I think that this is the second major planet this month that goes retrograde. So there is a slowing down of energy and it calls us inward. Neptune in Pisces, I've seen it manifest in, again, a shift in those very subtle internal shifts in people that eventually it clicks. Something clicks eventually and you're saying, oh, the understanding, but this is going to unfold over time. This is very subtle, still powerful energy that down the line is actually going to play a lot into the connection between Neptune in Pisces and Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. But the Sun Mercury conjunction in Cancer, known as a superior conjunction, because Mercury, this is the first time that Mercury meets the Sun being direct from its previous retrograde. So this is a little bit of an aha moment, a little bit of clarity around something that is still residue and unfolding from eclipse season. So I'm really curious to see the cards that came up with this. This is a lot of water energy. This requires a lot of trust, again, in something greater.
Yeah, and it's funny, this is where we get those fours. We have 2 4s for that day. So we've got both the 4 of Pentacles and the 4 of Swords. And the 4 of Pentacles is often called the miser, people being stingy and holding on to things. But it's also the card of, because 4s are very well balanced energy and it's material. They are almost like more money, more abundance than even the 10 of Pentacles that we just had a couple of days ago. It's the foundational aspect for prosperity and abundance. And if it's in a love relationship, it's focusing on things like, don't be stingy with your time. Don't be controlling of another person. Allow somebody to develop. Allow things to unfold naturally. So it's very foundational in a practical sense. And then we've also got the 4 of Swords, which is typically about taking care, self-care, but it's also on a spiritual level. It's also about allowing your spiritual side to unfold and develop. So it can be things like meditating, taking up a new spiritual practice. You can see in this deck, which is very different, these beams going into her. She's sitting in her rose petal bath. So those 2 energies combined are really interesting, because 2 4s together is an 8, and 8 is an infinity symbol. So it's, again, this like unlimited abundance when you shift your focus, when you decide, I'm just gonna switch it up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna create a foundation. Well, nobody's ever done that before. Well, I know how to do this, and I know how to do that, and I know how to do this, and I'm going to seek out the person who can show me how to do that. And then I'm going to just sit on it, and I'm going to like relax and let it like seep into every cell of my being.
Right. I think it's important to name that when we talked about May and eclipse energy and things unfolding and clarity coming through, that is true. And June, especially for those who had hard manifestations, like actual tangible physical manifestations of that eclipse season, June is so much about learning to navigate the new space of those manifestations. And what I mean by that is that you will not navigate the new space in the new way that you navigated the old space. So you will not navigate the new space in the way that you navigated your space in your life pre-eclipse, which was March and before. And then March and May brought a whole mess of things. June is like, oh, I guess I get to do things differently. I guess I get to, I don't know, redecorate in the way that I want. And if eclipse season didn't bring physical manifestations into your life, this is about navigating emotionally things that have happened internally or within family. So, and I want to name that because so much of June feels very intangible. But I think that and because we have to remember that things happen in order, we just have to understand that there's a shift happening right now. as to how we view things, how we relate to things, how we relate to people. So I've seen eclipse season bring for so many people a moving home.
Mhm.
So many people are moving home. So June is going to be the month where they get settled in and they run into things that they didn't realize they had. And they're like, well, maybe I don't need this piece of furniture, but I love this piece of furniture. Well, maybe I can put it there. What I've seen, on the other hand, is a lot of people become aware of how a lot of their work is actually paying off and how that is now changing the dynamic in relationships. And June is that month where it's like, oh, we get to talk, we get to have these conversations. Now, if eclipse season brought up some hard truths for you and you're still holding on to things, June is gonna feel messy, and the tendency to fall into the woe is me is far more likely to happen. So I wanted to name those components just to
Yeah.
ground it a little bit more, because June is an important month, because it shows us how it really asks us, how much do you really trust?
Mhm.
Mhm,
Yeah, it's like, wishing for, let's say you wished for, partner 2.0,
mhm,
because all the previous ones had all of these things, and you're done with that, and you do all the inner work and you attract partner 2.0.
mhm,
And you are programmed through all of your childhood and your adolescence and your early adulthood to expect a certain response, to give a certain response, all these things when something happens. But you've just manifested partner 2.0.
mhm,
So the situation arises, and then they say, woo, something that only partner 2.0 would say. All
mhm.
the inferior partners would never say this. And now you're going, ah, wow. Now, how do I react to that?
Mhm,
Am I going to go try and poke at it and try and bring it back down to the only thing I'm used to? Or am I going to rise up and maybe upgrade my own programming to match partner 2.0?
mhm.
And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a partner, but that's the way the energy feels to me of,
Right.
here's the stuff you asked for. Are you going to get it all, you're going to cover it in schmutz from all your past stuff, or are you going to actually go, oh, it's actually here. Like, so this is how
Mhm.
I have to adjust now to get it and to perpetuate it and to keep going and to like keep leveling up and growing as we move forward.
Yeah. There's a huge aspect between May and June of leveling up. And if you're dreading the pressure that comes with leveling up, it's not going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
And the whole month has been about, how are you choosing to view the situation? How are you choosing to see, to view, to hold, to move with what life is bringing you right now?
Hmm.
And I think we've been through so much initiation that at this point it's just, something's got to give. And I think that releasing a lot of the, again, a lot of the heavy sorrow that can come with certain things, is necessary.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. It's a big
Okay.
one.
It is. So we hope this is helpful. Thank you all so much for joining us again. Help us out with sharing, subscribing, telling your friends, and we will see you all next month.
Yes. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.